Enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussion. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table for smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Susan Baier, the Executive Director of the Allen County Public Library.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
At our dinner party.
Right, exactly. You didn't know that there were dinner parties going on in your building.
I didn't know, but I'm delighted by it.
Yeah. Well, we're pleased to have you, and very pleased that the library continues to have opportunities like this with Access Fort Wayne. And so I appreciate you taking a seat at the table.
Of course.
So can you tell me, I want to start with a little bit about your background and how you became a librarian.
Sure. So I grew up in a town of 400 people in southern Illinois. I joke that it's $3.99 now that I'm gone, now that I left. We did not have a public library growing up. We were that rural and that isolated. So my library was my grandmother's house, and I read all of the hardcover Nancy Drew, Bopsy Trends, Trixie Belden, going back in the day there,
Right.
of my aunts and uncles. And I was introduced to literature that way, and I think I became a librarian because I love books, but also because I just appreciated the idea of access and that not everybody had access to books easily. I was fortunate that I came from a family who loved to read, and I had all those books from my aunts and uncles. And also I had a family that supported my reading habit, and for gifts I would get gift certificates to bookstores and things like that. And not every child had that opportunity. So I really think the seeds were planted when I was a kid, that I recognized that access was important. Not everybody had it, and I wanted to get into a job, into a career where I could promote books and literacy and learning, and also do everything I can to make sure that everybody benefited from those opportunities, no matter where they lived.
And this was, I'm assuming this was prior to the internet and easy access to information.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
I am a child of the 70s, yes.
Yeah. So, I remember when we got our first set of the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah.
And then we would take the National Geographic issues, and that was sort of where you started learning about the world, and the Time Life book series.
Yes, so funny story about the encyclopedia. I remember one Christmas, I was probably 8 or 9, there was this huge box under the tree. And I had such anticipation. Oh my goodness, what could it be? It was massive. It was a set of World Book encyclopedias, which at first was a little like, oh, okay, that's a choice. Thanks, Santa. But I used those for years. And not every kid had access to encyclopedias at home, so really what a gift. I mean, this was
Right.
before the internet. I didn't have a library, so that was my research library for many years. Yeah.
And for a good part of the 20th century, I mean, there was very robust school libraries. I mean, I still even remember the name of my elementary school librarian, Mrs. Klingmeyer.
Mrs. Hodge for me,
Okay.
yes.
So, but that sort of has changed as well. Now that schools can't afford to, I mean, they do try to maintain libraries, but now I think with the focus so much more on providing technology that gives access. So I'm wondering how you see the role of the librarian from the time when you started as a librarian to today in the 21st century. How do you see that role has changed for good and bad?
I think it's for good. I think we are connecting learners of all ages to literacy, and I think the definition of literacy has really expanded over these past few years. Obviously, when you think of literacy, your initial thought is a book you can hold in your hand, and that is critically important. And I don't take for granted that not everybody has that skill. And also, we're talking about digital literacy and media literacy, how to determine what is a credible source of information versus not a credible source of information, health literacy, financial literacy. And I see librarians supporting all of that learning and understanding that people learn in different ways.
And do you see, I mean, going back to like when you and I were in school, or even when I had to go, I remember to the public library because I had to do a research paper. And so the role of really the library at that time was this free access to knowledge and information.
Right.
And the librarian would usually help you with the card catalog and say, okay, what are the topics, and direct you to where the books were, and or how to use microfiche at the time.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of now with the internet and this ease of access to information and whatnot, how do you think that the role that the library plays in a community as being one of the last bastions of truly coming here, and it is truly free?
Right.
No expectation of you to buy anything, no expectation that you can't be here, you need to do something in order to stay here. How do you think that that has changed in this age of technology and the information highway?
Well, you are correct. I say that we are preserving democracy each and every day here in our libraries. I think it is absolutely sacred that people can come in a library and simply be. There's no expectation to buy. They can just use the building in many different ways. And for some people, that is sitting with a good book, and for some people, that is using our Wi-Fi, and for some people, that is a temporary respite from the heat or the cold. And all of that is perfectly okay, and we welcome all of that. And also, I think with technology, it's allowed us to expand our reach so much that we have patrons who may never enter our doors. And that's okay too, because we have so many new ways to serve them. It's really wonderful that we had that infrastructure in place before COVID hit, because when we couldn't be open, when we couldn't circulate books, people were using our e-resources. People were using our e-books and our e-audiobooks for free. They still had that library experience. I think we have introduced a new user group to e-books and e-audiobooks simply out of necessity. When the shutdown was occurring, I was still working in my previous job in Kentucky, and we had phone calls from so many seniors, not all seniors, but a lot of seniors, saying, well, I have literally read every book in my house. I guess I'm going to have to learn how to use ebooks. And then we had the benefit of time to stay on the phone with people for sometimes up to an hour, walking them through. This is what you do on your iPad. This is the app you open. And some people, I mean, it just opened an entire new world for them. And with virtual programming, that is another thing that has just exploded. So at the time we are talking today, it is October, it is Family History Month. Our Genealogy Center is doing this robust series of programs. People literally around the world are tuning in to what we're doing here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In the first 2 weeks of October, 1,600 people tuned in to a virtual genealogy program. So without technology, there's no way we could have that reach. So people sometimes say, oh, with the internet, does anybody need libraries anymore? They do. They need them more than ever, and it's allowed us to reach more people than ever. So I say bring it on.
So do you think that with COVID and understanding how the idea of virtual programming and access to e-books, and as that was happening and continues to, we're sort of going down the road of hindsight looking at it.
Right.
And when you sort of took the role here and we're looking at, you know, the landscape of the library, and did it impact or affect what sort of your strategic thinking or where you want to place more emphasis? You know, I know like with the Fort Wayne Community Schools, they realized at the start of the pandemic, you weren't here yet, they had to step it up and get every child an either iPad or a laptop. And they also had to really think about hotspots for Wi-Fi. So that really caused them, and then they also sort of realized, some of the school systems here, that they really were not prepared in any way for this type of learning and really had to pivot and learn very quickly. So I guess what I would say is, what are the takeaways, and what does that mean sort of when you look at thinking just about that aspect of the Allen County Public Libraries in terms of your strategic vision?
Yes, there were lessons learned that will shape our libraries for generations to come. One thing we noticed is that Wi-Fi access was absolutely critical even with our libraries closed. We had people routinely setting up shop in our parking lot because we were a source of free Wi-Fi. People were doing their homework from our parking lots in their cars. People were applying for jobs. So that was something that really stuck with us. We also learned the importance, like the school district did, of circulating technology. So we currently circulate hotspots. We are looking into circulating laptops and Chromebooks and things like that. We also learned that virtual programming isn't going away, and we embrace that. We are looking forward to bringing people back together for programs, and that is so important as well, but we learned we really needed to invest in our virtual programs because they were attracting such a widespread nationwide audience. We also learned that our ebooks and e-resources more important than ever, and why print is not going away. I want to assure everybody out there, print is not.
Can you say that again for me, please?
Print is not going away.
Right.
Print is not dead. People want to hold a book in their hand, and I get it. And also, it can exist mutually, beautifully with ebooks and e-resources. Right. It's not either or. That being said, we did have to look at how we allocate resources. And yeah, with the increasing demand, we are going to need, and we have, reflected that in our budgets and buying more ebooks and buying more e-audio books. And thankfully, again, they peacefully coexist. I often get that question, either or. Do you like print or do you like electronic? Right. And I say both, bring it on.
Right.
Yeah.
I always say that I like to read fiction on the ebooks, but nonfiction, I like to read a book because I like to highlight, I like to go back, and you can't have that versatility yet with your,
right.
I always said that we would always have paper until you could do the 3 Bs, which is take electronics to the bathroom, the beach, and the bedroom. And when the iPad came, I was like, okay,
well,
this
there
is
you
it.
go.
But I think that part of the issue of paper and print is it's in our DNA, because until we fundamentally change the way we teach children to read, we will always have print. And we have found that people actually learn better when they're, like when I'm editing something, I can't edit it or if I have to read something, I need to print it out. So I think we're learning about that, the technology.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, print awareness and that tactile feeling of a book and how to hold a book and how to turn the pages, that is so critical in a child's reading development. That is not going away. And another change is also internally and how our staff interacts with each other and how we learn. So we have an annual staff training day. And we're really fortunate that our board really sees the value in investing in our staff and their development and their education. So once a year, we close to the public and we get together and learn. And I'm just grateful that our board supports that. Well, COVID made us reevaluate what that could look like. We didn't have it at all in 2020. This year, we at first scheduled something in person, and then with the Delta variant, we realized that's not going to work anymore. What could we do instead? So we had our very first virtual staff day, where in our theater here at the main library, we had a lot of content being created and shared, but we had all these satellite locations at all of our libraries and branches and departments where they were basically watching at home or watching at their work home. And we had people who have been here for 30 years say it was the best staff training day ever, that nothing was lost because of the virtual environment. So that is really a takeaway for us, to think much more creatively about how we can connect as a staff and how we can learn as a staff.
So I want to talk about some of the things of how being a librarian and working in a library have changed, and some of the things that you have done to sort of reinvent sort of the role of the library. So in your work in Paducah, Kentucky,
yes,
can you talk and tell me some of the things that I felt were very interesting successes that you had in looking at the library and its role? And I'm curious, one of the things that you did was you got rid of fines.
We did.
And we still have fines here. So I'm curious, what was the impact and effect of that, of not having fines? I mean, did people not return books, or was that a positive thing? And is that possibly something that you're going to look to implement here?
I really hope we get there here. I really do. I was very open and honest with that with our library board during my interview process. I mean, you read in my bio, I was asked to submit a bio as a candidate, and I said one of my greatest accomplishments was at my previous library that we moved to fine-free. Really, fines, that is something where the pendulum is really swinging the other way, and quickly. So many major library systems, major and smaller library systems across the country, have done away with fines. It doesn't mean that there's no responsibility. In most of those cases, if you lose a book or you damage a book or the dog ate it or it's dropped in the bathtub, we're going to need you to replace that. But studies have found that fines do produce a barrier for service, and they disproportionately impact people that need the library the most. Children, and often those with lower incomes. And that's a problem. Any barrier to service, we want to look at a way to overcome that. The studies have also shown that libraries that have done away with overdue fines actually see an increase in the items that are returned, because that stigma and shame and punitive nature is gone.
Right.
Because that's very real with people.
Oh yeah, no, because when when you would go to the library desk and the librarian, very stern. I mean,
Right.
And you'd give her the books, and she would just give you that look of scolding, like, and so yeah.
I remember back in Paducah, I went to get coffee at my local coffee shop, and the barista said, "Oh, I owe you money," and I was confused, like, did I pay too much for my coffee? What's going on? Oh, I'm late with the book. First of all, he really thought I knew that. Like, I carried around that information in my head. I don't. I'm sorry if I'm disillusioning anybody, but no, I don't remember that kind of detail. But no, I mean, that's not what I want people to think about when it comes to the library.
Right.
Not at all.
And you also did something very interesting that I'd really like you to talk about, was how you used the library and its building and location as more to service the community. Can you talk about some of the programs that you created there and how that really shifted, which is where libraries are sort of going in the 21st century, and some of talk about that.
Yeah, I believe that we need to meet people where they are. And I also believe that there are some issues in communities that need a multi-tiered approach. They are big problems and they need big solutions, and that means that everybody comes together to cover their piece of the pie. So, for instance, this is something that we did in McCracken County, Kentucky, that also happens here in Allen County, Indiana. We have programs to feed children, particularly in the summer, because we know that for many children, their consistent source of good, nutritious food is the school meal programs. And when they are out of school, families and children become food insecure. So this has been happening for years here at Allen County, and it happened in Paducah as well. But there would be summer lunch programs. There would be programs providing meals to the food insecure. And to do that in an environment that is print rich, that is literacy rich, that also doesn't have stigma, because for better or worse, there can be a stigma reaching out to a social service agency. I'm not saying that's fair, but that's real. But everybody goes to the library.
Right. But what about the ideas of you also turning it into having resources for social services or a clinic, or, I mean, talk about, I mean, really using a library as a community hub, as a center. Talk about that type of approach to your thinking in your past experiences.
So one of the beautiful things about public libraries is, I always say, it's the source of the most intersectionality in a town. That in a community, people often go to different places to shop, they go to different places to school, they go to different places to worship, and they all come together at the library. And I don't know of other places that have that kind of reach. So it just lends itself, when you have that kind of reach and that kind of community trust and community connection, that you should reach out to other agencies with similar missions that align with the library and see how you can collaborate for a greater community good. One example is working with other agencies to promote public health outcomes. We just wrapped up a series of immunization clinics with Super Shots. I met their executive director, Connie, at an event, and we started talking, and I love that. You can have these sort of creative collisions in a town the size of Fort Wayne and make things happen. And we had a series of flu and COVID vaccination clinics at our libraries. That's something I also did in Kentucky and in Los Angeles.
And so do you think that if the library is also going to be this community center and sort of have either access or be a direct conduit to social services or helping to solve issues in the community. Do you think then that the skills and the training of librarians also needs to shift to include more of the social worker or community activist or outreach person, or do you think that libraries need to create a position where you have on your staff a social worker or a psychologist or somebody like that? Because I think that in order to make sure that the library serves this way, that I think we have to change how we also think about teaching what is a librarian. I mean, right or wrong?
I would agree. So many library systems throughout the country are doing exactly what you said. It's often through partnerships. So they may partner with a school of social work or a healthcare agency to have a social worker, a therapist, a psychiatrist, on staff, or office hours in the library, that kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. So I think partnerships are the real key to getting that kind of work done. I will say that the role of the librarian has changed over the years, and they are a connector to information. And that can look many different ways. It can be, I would like the latest James Patterson novel. That's very important. And also it could be, can you connect me to organizations that can help me put food on my table, can help me because I'm running late this month with the utility bill. So it's a slightly different skill set. I'm not advocating that librarians become social workers because those are two distinct career paths.
Right.
But I do think it shows that the library needs to be connected with those other provider agencies in a community so they can make those referrals and warm handoffs, if you will, that we may not have the answer for you here at the library, but we know who does have the answer, and let's make that connection.
But do you think that it's important to have someone, because it is a different skill set, because like you said, everybody comes to the library, and so, a lot of times, due to lots of other issues of our society, the library also becomes a place for the homeless and those who are mentally challenged that may not have anywhere to go. And so to have someone like Guns Up, it's sort of like with the police, having different people respond to different issues. So do you think that having someone who, part of their job is to outreach to the community and be that connector, but also to have someone here so when certain issues arise or, realizing, because a very interesting story, you weren't here yet. So the library was celebrating its 100th anniversary. This was 2 years ago, I think. And so they were giving out these really great, I don't know if you've had them, Cookie Cottage cookies.
Yes.
Okay. So there was a little boy who kept coming back for more cookies. And I was talking to the librarian who was standing there. And she, and he kept coming and, she kept saying, take them. And she said to me, it's probably because he was hungry.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking to myself, I wish the library would have had like behind, either a loaf of bread and some peanut butter or even like a brown bag that, noticing, like to me, it wasn't enough that she noticed that he was hungry, but I wish that then there was something that she could have done, to provide him in that moment, that instant, a sandwich or something. And so I'm just wondering if having someone who sort of takes that baton and, and then also instills that in your staff and sort of when you see something like that or keeps peanut butter and jelly in their office, if that is something that is important or should be done or you're thinking about, or, I mean, I know it's a challenge because, again, it is beyond the traditional scope of what a library and a librarian is supposed to do. But the truth is, as we said, it is the one place, and it does become the community hub, just like you and I were talking, that really for the redevelopment of downtown Fort Wayne, it was when the Allen County Public Library put a stake in the ground and said, we are going to put the flagship branch in downtown Fort Wayne so that we could be the central hub and support and revitalize the community.
Yeah, that's a lot, and lots of thoughts on that. Libraries across the country, the story you told that happened here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that's a very poignant story, and that is happening in libraries, big and small, across the country. And there are multifaceted approaches to that. Some libraries are bringing in, as we talked about, social workers. I think a few key things, and a few key things we are doing here, is training our staff to bring in outside groups and outside organizations to offer training to staff so they do feel more comfortable with those kind of referrals. I think the key is all about partnerships because, like I said, these problems are so big that not just one agency can solve them. I know of libraries, and we did this in Kentucky, where, you know, the little free food pantries that you're seeing around town, we have one at my previous library. And that's something that I hope to possibly bring to some of our locations as well.
I'm sure, yeah, that's a local group that does the,
Ford,
and I'm
Indiana.
sure they would love to
Yeah,
set one
yeah.
up here. I think, you know, and that's what, you know, what I was saying before is that living in a big city, I always felt that I was a guppy in an ocean. But here, you could be a bass in a pond. I mean, you can have impact. So I think so I want to pivot a little bit in thinking about the nature of libraries based on the fact that it's become more acceptable to be in a shared or borrowed society. You know?
Right.
Like people, I mean, even with Uber, but even when you could just rent somebody's car, or you think about Airbnb, right? You rent someone's home.
Right.
Or rent the runway, where you can rent a dress, or, you know, rent a bag. Or so I'm curious, with that idea that people understand that they borrow something and then return it, does that also get you to think about other ways in which you can create the basis of the foundation of what is a library in other areas? So for instance, I read about a library that has a lending toy library, so that, you know, you get toys, and then as your children age, and or maybe even the issues, you know, I know that there's like Dress for Success or prom dresses, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, in our current definition of a library, maybe those aren't areas that a library would think about, but because of the nature of how everything is changing, and because we are in the shared society, are those things that libraries are thinking about, or different ways?
Absolutely, and I always laugh a little because everything old is new again, I guess. Some things that are looked at as very disruptors or very, you know, Silicon Valley, new and sexy, libraries have been doing them for a long time. Libraries were one of the original shared economies. There's a lot of talk about co-working space, and that is very, very important, and we have a lot of those opportunities here in the community, and libraries have been offering co-working space since forever. So that being said, I don't know if you are aware, we have a library of things right here at the Allen County Public Library. It is based at our Little Turtle location, and you can check out a cornhole set. You can check out a karaoke machine. You can check out, there's a birding kit. I think there's lawn darts.
There's also seeds. You
There's
don't have
seeds.
to check those out.
Yes,
you have a very large
I'm glad
seed
you
library.
said that. Yes, there are seeds. So, yeah, I mean, there are other examples of that sharing economy already. Who needs to own anymore, right?
I mean, I also just wondered, like, you know, if because the library knows how to create a shared economy on very large scale.
Right.
And also being able to move things through a system, so that if it's at one branch or another.
We have the logistics down.
Right.
Yep.
So I'm curious, because one of the things that I always think about is, you know, under lower income communities. And so, you know, obviously everybody has to keep their grass and, you know, at a certain height, and manicure their lawns and for property values. But owning a lawnmower is very expensive. So I always wondered, like, well, couldn't there be like a lending library of, you know, equipment for lawnmower? And that could be more like, you know, like a satellite or a shed, or, you know, or even bringing it to a neighborhood, you know, for a weekend, and people check it out. And I mean, I just wonder if, you know, because really it's sort of what I always think that what the library knows how to do is its really good skill is dissemination. And so if you think about what other ways, how it can use that, you know, I just think that, you know, are those things that are not far from thinking about. Or
Oh, they're happening throughout the country. I used to work at the Los Angeles County Library System, and I just saw a press release that they are launching a tool library.
Oh, good. Yeah. And so when you look at, and you also did recently, you did a series of community conversations about the library and its role in the community and how people use it or would like to see it.
Right.
What were some of the findings that intrigued you, especially because it was the perfect time for you to do it,
Right.
because you were here enough that you sort of got the lay of the land, but it was great before you sort of start your own development with your team of the strategic vision going forward.
Right. That was part of our facility master plan, and that is still in process. So nothing has been finally determined. There are still a lot of opportunities that will be happening later this year and also this winter and spring for public input. But early takeaways, how many people love the library, which I knew that, but it was really gratifying to see that firsthand. That print is not dead, and we knew that already, that people really value, this is a very literate community, it's a community that values print and values learning, and they want to see that reflected in their libraries, and also they want to see enjoyable, attractive, comfortable, welcoming public spaces. I had one of those conversations with a group of teens, and I'm convinced that Gen Z will save the world. I mean, I just love talking to young people, and I learn so much from them. And they kept talking. The word of the day when we had that conversation was vibes. How important vibes were. They were very much in tune with aesthetics, and that it's really important to have comfortable, welcoming spaces, and talked about the importance of natural light and importance of zones in the library. There are some places in the library where you want to be quiet and with your own thoughts and able to concentrate and focus. And there also need to be spaces where you can collaborate and you can make a little noise, because often with learning comes a bit of noise, right? So they were just so astute. So that was really fun to listen to them. They also, and they weren't the only ones, but the teens, they really want a place to have a good cup of coffee.
Right. Yeah. Well, we used to have, you know, we're all waiting because right now you're using it for the Lincoln Center. So we're hoping, we're hoping that that is going to become back to being a coffee shop. But let's talk about the Lincoln Center, and because you're not, there's so much interesting technology and really creating a space. You talk about creating a space that is adaptive and being very versatile. So talk about that and what that's going to do and the thinking in that, creating that space.
For the Lincoln Collection?
Yes.
Right, so we are almost at the finish line of opening up our Roland Center for Lincoln Research. It has been a real labor of love for everybody involved. It did get a little bit of delay because of various supply chain issues with COVID. But what's going to be so wonderful about it is that we have had these priceless Lincoln artifacts that have been in some ways hidden, that have been in our basement. And with the opening of the Roland Center and also with some of the technology that we're going to have, we are bringing these to light, and we are opening this up for the community and the world to experience. And we're already a tourist destination because of our genealogy center. People literally come from all over the world to spend time here in our center, and this is just going to amplify it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because of the use of technology. Like if you have a school group coming in, and let's say they're really focused on the Gettysburg Address and the impact of that, because of the way that you're using technology and digital displays, and you actually can tailor a lot of the objects and things that you have specifically to looking at that period of time, versus if somebody just wanted to understand why, you know, I think it's funny that why is there such a connection with Lincoln and Indiana? Because you think of Illinois, because, you know, Illinois is the only state when they used to have, you know, toll booths where you threw money, you could use pennies.
And I'm a native Illinoisan, and I did not know that yet.
Yeah, but now nobody, you know. But so I think that that's really interesting, though, how you're going to be able to adapt it, and you know, it's sort of like instead of if you build it, they will come. It's like they come and we will build it. And so I think that's also indicative of maybe how you think about a library and the versatility of space, as opposed to, like you said, having defined spaces. Maybe you have spaces at certain times of the day where there are more senior citizens who need easy access. They need everything on one floor. So it becomes one thing. And then after 4, it becomes like the teen center. And then, then it can become for a group after,
Yeah, that flexibility is key. One thing to really see how a library is used, you watch how the patrons use it. And if you don't have it set up the right way, you find out really quickly because the patrons will make the adjustments themselves. Like we always say in libraries, if the patrons are moving the furniture, instead of putting up a sign saying don't move the furniture, why are they moving the furniture? And what do we need to adjust? Because obviously something's wrong, and they're letting us know that, and how do we respond?
Like you see that with computer terminals, because a lot of times it's not a single person, especially if you're using it for learning or something. There's either 2, or with kids, because the big idea of group projects, there could be 3 or more. So thinking about how you create a versatile space.
I remember back in the day when computers were still very new in libraries, a lot of libraries, including the one I worked at the time, would have rules, 1 person per computer. And now that just seems so archaic and out of touch, because that's not how we learn. That's not how we collaborate. That's not how work gets done.
Although if I come to think about it, does the library have a lot of printers available for? I mean, I know we have the 3D Makers Lab, but are there printers? Because like I said, that people. And then does the library charge for? Because actually, I'll tell you a very funny story. So I was helping Ben Eisbart is part of Quest, and he's doing his paper is on Chuck Surak, and so I did research and stuff because I had Chuck on the program, and so I sent it to him and everything, and then he emailed me and he said, well, at the library, do you think I should start with the business and tech department, and do they charge like for copies and printout? And I said, honestly, I don't really know. And so this is Ben Eisbart, who is on the board of the library, is asking me where he should go in the library to start, and like not knowing, like, will they print out things for you or not? And I was surprised because I needed some things from the genealogy center, and they were on microfiche. And so I was like, oh my God, am I gonna have to pay to have all this printed out and stuff? And I came to learn, no, that they were, because just having to endure using microfiche. But so I was thinking about that even the former, president of the board of the library is questioning, and I thought that was so interesting.
Well, there's a lot to know about the library. I get asked questions, and sometimes I'm just, I'm going to have to defer to the expert on that. But we have printers. Printers are, I think, increasingly important because a lot of people now are coming to the library with their own technology, which really changes how we have to approach our furnishings, our fixtures, and our buildings, because...
And electrical outlets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like airports, they had a rethink.
Right. So people may have their laptop, they may have their phone, but they don't have a printer. So yes, we provide printers. We also can do Wi-Fi printing. So you're coming in on your phone, you need to print out your boarding pass, although you don't really need to. I'm dating myself there. You can, but if you wanted to.
Some people still want to have a boarding pass.
Yeah. So we can do that.
And I think that's something that I find as someone who's in the information and communication business, that one of the hardest things, and I'm wondering if you find this, is that people just don't know. Like, how do you inform them? Because, the amount of programming, and like, if you think about in the given day, what's going on in the library, like, and I'm here a lot because I do a lot of programming and stuff, but you have the gallery, and then you have the meeting rooms. I didn't realize somebody was having a gender reveal party. I didn't realize that you could rent a room to have a party.
You absolutely
And
can.
then there was the consulate was here a couple of days. And then I actually met, when I was here for the happiness exhibit, a group of women who are quilters.
Yes.
And so I'm actually going to do a story for the publication about it. So what is and I'm finding this too, how do you, as someone who is in the expert of finding and disseminating information, do you find that frustrating that people just don't know, or how do you engage? Or
I don't find it frustrating, but I find it challenging, and it is even more challenging because there are so many different conduits to information. There's no longer just three networks, right? There's no longer 3 networks and the morning newspaper. People get their information from so many different avenues, and how do we touch all of those? It's a challenge even with our staff. You know, we have a staff of 360, and just to keep everybody informed of what's going on, because the resources are so rich and there's so many moving parts. So I would say that communication just has to be often and ongoing and customizable for the audience. And sometimes it's just getting out to the public, because some things you don't, how do I put this? It's not going to be relevant to you until you need it, right? Like printing.
Right, right, yeah, right.
So that's why one thing that, well, it's been a little difficult with COVID, but things are starting to roll back. Our library staff tries to get out as much as possible, to get out in the community, to go to those resource fairs and to school visits and to visit to daycares and talking to community groups, talking to the Rotary Club about what the library offers.
So as you look at that, you've been here almost 8 months.
Almost 8 months.
Okay, and so you're starting to formulate your strategy and vision for the Allen County Public Library. What are some of the things that you're looking to do or thinking about, or where do you see there were needs and opportunities?
One thing that we're working on right now that I'm just thrilled about, we are starting our very first Allen County staff DEI team, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It is staff driven. It is being made up of a number of staff members representing different backgrounds, different positions in the library, and to really look at all of our services and our resources and our programming and our hiring through that DEI lens, and to see what we're doing right and what we can do better. So that is ongoing for us. Also, I am such a passionate advocate of outreach and community engagement, and we do so much of that already, and I want to see that expand in strategic ways. I think partnerships are where it's at. So really developing that arm of the library. I would love to see an entire division just dedicated to outreach and programming partnerships. And again, we're doing a ton already, but I think there's an opportunity for even more, and to form some real strategic, intentional partnerships with other agencies. So those are two of my big top of mind things. We're also, and we touched on this earlier, we are in the early to middle stages of our facility master plan to look at what our buildings should and could look like in the future, and making sure that we develop a plan that is fiscally achievable, but also being aware of the growth in Allen County and responding to that, and also making sure that we're not leaving any people or any communities behind.
Yeah, because when you think about how Allen County and Fort Wayne is developing, it's not concentrated because it's out and west. I'm still learning my directions, east and west.
Both, yeah.
So what I'm wondering about is maybe also thinking about what is a branch. Like for instance, with all of these new developments, and you know there was a huge one that's announced that's going to be low income and mixed. Maybe having a retail storefront that's sort of a branch, because a lot of times, like the branches don't have everything, but you can go into any branch. Like if I wanted a puzzle or something from the Little Turtle, but I can't get there, I could go in here and ask for it, and then, like I said, you've got the logistics system.
Yeah, we got that down.
So that you can have it delivered, you know, even better than Amazon probably sometimes. So I'm wondering if you're thinking about what is a branch.
Oh, sure. Absolutely, absolutely. It can look in so many different ways.
And it may even be a place where there's coffee and hot spots, you know, in one of these where you also would say are Wi-Fi deserts or information deserts, you know, because I think that that's important, that you don't necessarily need to do a huge bond offering and to build a new facility. You maybe could take over, you know, half a facility. Like I like this idea. There was a local newspaper, you know, because obviously local news is in trouble. So what they did was they needed a resource for funding, but also they wanted engagement with the community. So they actually created a coffee shop. So the front literally is the coffee shop, and then the back is the newsroom. So actually people can come in, they see people working, and so and because that's really what everybody is talking about now is audience engagement and getting out there in the community. And so I was like, you know, that would be great. And when I started my first media company, I actually rented a storefront because that's what I could afford. And we were between I'm dating myself, the video store, the pizza place, and the Chinese restaurant. But we had a lot of people who would come in and be like, well, what do you do? And then we would say, oh, well, we do these publications. And so it's not necessarily thinking that you have to have your own building or this own space. It could be, like you said, a collaborative, or even, I love those little libraries that nobody, I always go when I see them, I clean them up. But, using those more as a sort of facility or access to communities and, all of these kinds of innovative things.
Now, I'm also very interested in mobile delivery of services. So we already do that with a service called Library at Home, which was a lifeline to people during the pandemic. We have an outreach vehicle that goes to numerous assisted living facilities and also does home deliveries for folks who, due to age or physical ailments, are not able to come to the library in the traditional manner.
And so that's even with, even beyond, because what else, again, I don't realize that people realize how much you can get for free on your your e-library card. I mean, you can get movies and magazines and podcasts and
absolutely,
and then all
music.
kinds of I remember a friend of mine's daughter was having problems with reading, and I really liked that phonics program, and so we looked up online, and it was like $9.99 a month, and she couldn't afford it. So I looked at in the library. I said, well, I bet you the library probably has it, and sure enough, if you go to the library, and you can even bring your own laptop, you can use it for free. So I think that, so that's interesting. I didn't realize that you do that mobile to bring people. And I don't think people realize that you can rent movies and CDs, and you even have like musical scores. And,
No, absolutely.
And so there are certain things that are hidden away in the Allen County Library. What was the one thing that surprised you or you found really intriguing that is something that the Allen County Library has?
Oh, I think we're here right now, Access Fort Wayne. I am not aware of any other public library in the country that has this robust of a public communication system with a radio station and a television station, and the level of talent that we have here. I mean, most libraries now are doing some sort of virtual programming and creating videos.
Right.
And a lot of them are doing that from their iPhone, and, good on them. And the content that we put out is professional quality.
Right. You think about, like, you want to do virtual programming, or you want to do a lecture series, or you have a studio to do it, or if you wanted to do like people, reading books to children at night so they could tune in at 9 o'clock, you could tape that here. I mean, it is. And I think also what people don't realize, the importance, it parlays into libraries, but also access is, it is really the last way to truly see what your city government is doing, unedited and not being filtered through a press release, because of the fact of what's happening with local media, and that nobody's going to these council meetings. And I wanted to understand something about HANDS, which is an organization. And so I was able to go online and I could see their monthly meeting. I mean, I could go back years, I could do their annual meeting, and then of course I could fast forward through the parts I didn't like. But I don't think people really realize that it is really, it used to be that you had a paper of record for things that were happening and we don't really. So you really have this, and it's unedited. I mean, they take the time to go and record these meetings. And so I think that people don't really understand that value that this service offers.
Right, the transparency that offers.
Right.
And also that it's on demand, that, city council might meet at 5 o'clock on a Monday, and that's just not going to work for you.
Right.
But you can watch it, at your leisure in the comfort of your home. To have that kind of access to the inner workings of government, I agree that people don't maybe fully appreciate how that is being provided here. Yeah.
Or I think some of the perception of what is community television and things like that. And but I meant also, when I asked you about something in the library discussion, also, is there something like funny or unique or something that you were like, okay, that's really odd, like, is there anything like that you've come across that just tweaked your interest?
Really, well, I was delighted by this. I don't know if it's odd, but our genealogy center is, I believe, 40,000 square feet. I mean, it's bigger than a lot of libraries. And sometimes occasionally I just wander the stacks. Honestly, sometimes, particularly in the afternoon when the energy level dips and I just can't take another Zoom meeting or being behind a computer screen, I just get up and walk around a bit. And I discovered there is in my little village of Waltonville, population 400, there is this historical journal called the Prairie Historian. And it is very low tech. It's just like photocopied,
Right.
stapled together. And our genealogy center carries it. I was blown away. I guess I shouldn't have been because that's
Right.
what they do, but I was just so delighted to see my little tiny hometown.
Well, I was surprised in the genealogy. They have all these newsletters that they
Yeah.
get. I was like, and you wouldn't believe what their newsletters on.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it just amazed me.
I believe, I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I don't think I am. They have at least 3,000 vendors they work with.
It's unbelievable.
It's truly
So
unbelievable.
have you started to do your own genealogy?
Well, I was lucky in that the hard work was done for me because I am a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Oh, okay.
And I am because my grandmother was a member. So she was the genealogist, so I kind of benefited from her
And there
work.
is a couple cases right now in the library display that is about out in the main hall about the Daughters of the
Yes,
Revolution.
we have a very strong relationship with our local chapter, and they do, I'll call it office hours here. If you're wanting help to establish your patriot lineage, you can come in and they'll work with you. Yeah.
And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask questions about books and reading. So what is currently on your nightstand?
So I'm listening to something now.
Oh.
So I guess it's my virtual nightstand.
Okay.
I'm listening to a memoir called Mixed Plate by the comedian Joe Coy, and he is doing a show in a few nights at the embassy, and I am going to see him. So I like to do my homework before a show. So I'm listening to his autobiography. I love a celebrity tell-all. Very, very into it. So that's some of my favorite
So
things.
you create
to
your own
listen
multimedia
to.
experience.
Yeah,
You're
yeah, I
reading,
guess I
and then you're
am.
going to see him live. And what is your favorite children's book?
Oh, I have a lot. Little Women always holds a special place in my heart. I have a copy that my grandmother had in her house, and I have that in my house, and it's one of my treasures. For a picture book series, I love the Olivia series by Ian Falconer about a 5-year-old pig who is very curious and a little bossy. I enjoy that a lot.
So you go more, that's like 21st century.
Yeah.
What about classic children's literature? Is there any book is there one book, people always ask me, what is a book that means the most to you? But is there one book from your childhood that really, because you talked about the books in your grandparents' home, that really, or maybe it was the, Nancy Drew books, that really sort of spoke to you. Do you remember?
Well, not a book, but an author. So being a child of the 70s and 80s, Judy Bloom,
right.
was a part of that,
Right.
and really was just a fixture in my tweens and teens reading. And I loved them so much for many reasons, because they were just such a realistic depiction of teenagers. I remember I actually got in trouble with a friend's parent because one of my friends borrowed one of my Judy Bloom books.
Was that forever?
No, it wasn't quite that racy. It was Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
Right.
And a friend of mine borrowed it. I guess I was librarianing even then, and her mother wasn't quite ready for her to read that book, and I got scolded a bit.
Well, I remember, so Mrs. Klingmeyer, my elementary school library, girls could not check out the book, The Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing.
Wow.
So because it was about peeping Toms and other issues. So it's still, things have changed.
Things have changed, thankfully.
So at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game.
Oh, okay.
What is your favorite word?
Oh, gosh. Serendipity?
What is your least favorite word?
Thirsty.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh gosh. Good music and good conversation.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Wow, I need to have a snappy answer for that. What turns me off? Rudeness turns me off. And oh, okay, no sense of humor.
Well, a lot of the country has lost that. But
Yeah.
what sound or noise do you love?
What sound? My cat purring.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Chalkboard.
I thought it might have been the shh.
I don't like that either. Yeah.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, a talk show host.
Well, you could do it here.
I could.
What profession would you not like to do?
I would not be a good engineer. My mind just isn't wired that way.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement is, I think, having a happy, functional, healthy marriage. Knocking on wood. That's one of them. Mm-hmm.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Oh my goodness, there's so many people. Dolly Parton would be on top of the list.
How would you like to die?
Oh gosh. Quickly and painlessly after a long life. My paternal grandmother, with the books, she passed away at 86, and she passed away very suddenly in her sleep with really no health issues in advance. And while it was very hard on the family, what a way to go, you know.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Here's a drink.
Well, I want to thank Susan Baier
Thank
for having
you.
a seat at our table. And next time I'll bring some drinks for
Yes,
you.
yes.
And you can learn more about Ann Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at anngoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.